Welcome to the Money to the Masses podcast, putting you in control of your finances. One is an expert with years of experience giving free advice. The other owns his own microphone and can do the odd bit of editing. Here are your hosts, Damien Fahy and Andy Leeks.
Now, Damien, before we get on with this week's podcast, you had something quickly to say about our sponsors.
Yeah, we've got a new sponsor, Money Farm, and Money Farm are an online investment advisor and one of the biggest digital wealth management companies in Europe. So a big thank you to them for sponsoring the podcast. Now, Money Farm create portfolios to maximise long-term returns using ETFs to make incredibly cheap portfolios. And you even get the first £10,000 of your portfolio invested without any charge from Money Farm. And if you enter the code TTM20K into the box when you sign up, you get the first £20,000 of your portfolio invested and run by moneyfarm.com without any charge.
Great stuff. On with this week's show. Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fahy and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm buzzing, Andy. I am in such a good mood this week because...
Good.
Do you know what it is that's put me in such a good mood? Is we're innovating. We always innovate, but we're doing... anybody who has listened to or been on our Facebook page or followed me on Twitter will have noticed that we have gone into the world of video with Money to the Masses, which is quite exciting. It's something we wanted to do for ages, and it's really having the time and ability to quickly do video, and so we're doing a lot of that. Snippets of me either promoting the podcast, talking about sort of money tips or anything. It's just whatever takes our fancy. So it's more kind of fly on the wall. And go to our Facebook page. It's actually me in a pair of shorts talking about podcasts. So if you want to see what I look like with a pair of shorts on, then feel free to have a look. But it's quite nice to be, when you do, what it's like, Andy, when you do anything and new, you get renewed energy, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I thought it was really clever. You said that you were buzzing, and then you sort of described it as fly on the wall, which I thought was a nice little tie-in. I like working with words. That was really good. Anyway.
Really good, Andy, but totally unintentional.
Good. What you been up to outside of the pod, outside of work? Anything interesting? Let the listeners know what's going on in your private life.
No, nothing interesting, Andy. Actually, I've been working. I've been up in London a lot this week, so I can't say that I've been doing anything.
I'm glad I asked.
Glad I asked. Actually, what I've been doing is trying to survive a 6-month-old changing rooms and moving into her own room, teething and struggling with the heat, all in one go. So you know what that means. Yeah. Back to the days of insomnia, no sleep. But hey, I'm not complaining.
Good.
Andy, I should ask you, what about you?
Yeah, nothing much going on in my life apart from the fact that my eyes are currently on fire.
If there was something I wasn't expecting you to say just then, is that your eyes are on fire, because from here they look pretty okay.
Yeah, no, my eyes are on fire. But I mean, I learned this very early on from when I started learning how to cook. If you're working with chilies, wash your hands thoroughly and try not to pick your nose, rub your eyes, or scratch anywhere tender. So yeah, I've made the mistake. I've been rubbing my eyes, and my eyes are absolutely on fire at the moment. I cooked a lovely beef stir fry.
But you couldn't see it to eat it. You just knew it was there. Your eyes were streaming. Yeah, I tell you what, Andy, I've got to tell you this quick story of completely off money or anything like that. A good friend of mine when I was at university, we were talking earlier. It's 20 years since I went to university, and which I can't believe. But there was a friend of mine, and he came up with the genius idea that he was aching after football training, and he decided that what better way to get deep heat to work its magic on his muscles than to put a whole load of it into a hot bath and mix it up. And this was before
Wow.
This was before the days that Deep Heat decided there was probably a way of doing this that wasn't likely to put you in hospital. And anyway, he did it, and I just remember hearing him scream from the other end of the corridor because all his pores opened up with the heat of the butt, and all the deep heat went into them. And so you feel the the pain with your chilies, I think his eyeballs were the only place on his body that weren't on fire. So it makes me laugh whenever I think of that story. So yeah, I feel sorry for you, Andy.
I have got one other story actually about burning, and it's where I effectively earned Dad of the Year on Sunday. We went to Botany.
That's a bold claim if ever there was one.
Well, it's quite the opposite, and as you'll come to realise, on Sunday we went to Botany Bay. Absolutely beautiful sunshine. Took the children. We went with a few family friends, and we went down there. And it was my job to look after my eldest daughter in terms of putting the sun cream on. So into her swimming costume, and I really slapped it on from head to toe, not missing a single mark. Except for the fact that this was a swimming costume that had a circle cut out the back. Now, cut to 5 hours later, when my daughter was getting changed and started to complain of a bit of a sore back, and then realising that I'd completely missed this circle on her back, and it was not a pretty sight. In fact, I'll send you a picture of it later personally. But yeah, my wife was not impressed with me. And actually this week my daughter's had to do PE, and she also does this thing called Welly Wednesdays where they get changed, and all the people in the class, including the teachers, have been sort of questioning what on earth has happened to her.
She looks like she's been paintballing. They probably was thinking, what's this 6-year-old child doing? But bless her, but it's easily done. I mean, it's such a responsibility putting kids' sun cream on. When I'm on holiday, I dread it because I just know I'm going to get told off for missing something like the odd ear. You don't think the sun gets everywhere, doesn't it? But anyway, poor girl. But she's okay now.
She's okay. As this is a money podcast, I suppose sort of 5 or 6 minutes in, we should touch on the money. What have we got coming up this week?
Some good stuff as usual on the money front. We're talking about downsizing, and in particular a downsizing dilemma. So there are a lot of people who want to, or they plan to retire based on downsizing their property. So I'm going to talk about the problem associated with that. People might know that I'm not a fan of this, but there's been some cracking research done into that. I want to talk about insurance. 2 key things about insurance that have come out lately. So if you've got an insurance policy of any kind, you will want to listen to this, particularly if you ever want to make a claim. And the final thing is advisor alpha, and by that I mean I'm going to talk about the value that financial advisors should add and whether your advisor is doing it.
Good, okay. First things first then, the downsizing dilemma. What's going on here?
Right, the downsizing dilemma is effectively, a lot of people, if I had £1 for everybody who said to me that they plan, that their house is their pension. I mean, how many times have you heard that? People say, yeah, well, my house will grow in value and I'll probably downsize. And then I'll take that money out and live off that and produce an income. Now, it seems a good idea and a very simple idea in principle, and that's why people like it, as opposed to pensions and investing. Now, I'm not a massive fan of it because I just know I've seen cases where people, when you actually get to the point of downsizing, not everybody wants to, because when you want to retire, might just be the point in your life where you actually want to enjoy the wealth you've actually accumulated, so your house and things like that. So I wanted to just talk about some research that has been done into this, just to emphasise to people, anybody out there who is thinking about using the downsizing idea to fund their retirement, is just to give them a bit of a reality check, and hopefully they'll think or maybe sort of replan. So one of the reasons people want to downsize, and they say that we can do this when we hit retirement, is the amount of price growth they see in their property. So we've all bought property and then prices go up, and it seems to people think it will go up forever. I mean, how many times again have you heard people say, oh, you should invest in bricks and mortar houses you can't lose with property and all that sort of stuff, and it encourages the whole downsizing idea. Now, a company called Royal London, and they're an insurance company, and okay, they do sell pensions, so you always question the idea why people do this research, but I still think it's pretty valid. So they did a piece of research and came up with the result that people, the average person, if they plan on downsizing, can expect a hefty income shock. And let's just use a real example that they came across when they were doing the research. So let's just say a typical person out there earns £27,400 a year. That's not unrealistic. That's close to what the average earnings are in the UK. Now, if that person when they got to retirement, lived in a typical detached house, let's say, because let's be slightly aspirational. They've gone and moved from semi-detached or whatever, and they've ended or terraced, and they end up in a detached house. And if we go for the average value which Royal London have of £310,000, that kind of puts it somewhere that's fairly average. That's quite low for London, but not for elsewhere in the country. So it's a fair number. Now, if that person decided to downsize and release some money from their existing property, which they would then buy an annuity with, let's say they downsized to a semi-detached house that was worth £197,000. Now, any of you who are quick enough to do the maths there would have worked out there's just over 100k that would have been released. And if they went and bought an annuity, now for those of you out there who aren't sure what an annuity is, it's basically you go to an insurance company, much like Royal London, and you chuck a lump of money at them and say, come on, look after me for the rest of my life, and they will give you a steady income for the rest of your life until you die. And then at that point, all your money's gone, and that's just hard luck. But it's guaranteed. That's the thing that makes annuities attractive. But the downside is that rates aren't that fantastic at the moment. Now, if you had done that exercise, then Royal London estimated the best you could hope for in terms of an annual income is £13,700. Now, if you remember what I said was the starting point of the average earnings, it was £27,400. So we have effectively halved the amount. So that's the income shock. So if you're a typical person in the UK and you want to downsize, according to this research, you can expect to only have a pension that is going to be half the amount you earn now. So does that surprise you, Andy?
Yeah, it does surprise me really, because I do hear it all the time that when people are downsizing that they just think that that's going to sort them out for the rest of retirement. So yeah, I mean, explain it to me. It must obviously be something to do with the annuity rates or something, I suppose.
Well, it is exactly that, Andy. It's the annuity rates you get. And don't forget that the companies that give you an annuity income want to make money. They actually base it on the fact of when the typical person is going to die. So they are going to stack the odds in their favour. So they're not going to be too generous. But also it's based on what the gilt yields are out there. So the gilt is basically a loan to the government. Let's not get too complicated on it, but it is a standard investment vehicle out there. So, but the point that's interesting about this is that annuity rates have been falling even more, because as a result of all this money printing, if you want to know what that is, we've done a podcast on it, but it causes
something to do with watering the garden. Was that right?
That was my analogy. So it's watering the garden. I'm glad you listen, Andy. I'm glad you listen. Even if that comment has just confused thousands of people, but go back and listen. But of course, annuity rates have been falling because interest rates have been falling. So this scenario is only going to get worse, and it actually affects, according to Royal London, 3 million people are going to be looking to downsize. That is 1 in 12 people. So that is a sizable chunk that are planning to do it. I mean, that surprised me. I always hear it, but I didn't actually believe most people would do it. But of course, those numbers are averages, and there are other ways. You don't have to take an annuity. You can use what they call income drawdown, where you actually still invest the money and hope the pot grows. But there's no guarantee. But it just highlights the lack of certainty surrounding the income, and you are probably going to have to take a bit of a pay cut, as it were. And the other thing to bear in mind, if anybody is still thinking, do you know what, I don't care what these guys are saying, I'm still going to downsize. Bear in mind that your children, typically, people don't buy their first home now until they're in their late 30s, so you are likely to still have your kids at home. So people who used to, in days gone by when people weren't living at home when their parents retired, it is happening more and more because people are having children later and later, and those children are staying at home later. So it's one thing to bear in mind. Of course, there are alternatives if you don't want to downsize. Use things like equity release, remortgaging, which we've touched upon before. So go back and check out those podcasts. So the upshot is, if you
get a lodger.
Get a lodger. That's a good one, actually, Andy. Get a lodger. There was another report that came out this week about the number of elderly people that have spare rooms, and I think it was a part of a government report, but basically they were saying that these old people were clogging up the system and should somehow be encouraged to either move on, which I don't really know how that would work, or somehow we've got to get these spare rooms active. And now I don't know how they do that. Do they make old people share? I just like the idea that perhaps you get old and they go, right, you've hit 65, 70, you two are sharing. It's kind of like, yeah.
Well, they're making working people car share in order to speed up the road. So maybe they should make old people house share.
to speed up the housing market. Do you know what? I think we've just solved the housing crisis, Andy, in one fell swoop.
Yeah, until we turn 70 or 80, and then we're told to do the same. Actually, we could move in together, mate. I wouldn't mind living with you.
Well,
That'd be all right.
We could do, Andy. I'm not sure a lot would get done, but we could live together. I think if Theresa May is listening to this podcast, she may have just found her new housing minister.
I thought you were just about to say, if Theresa May is listening to this podcast, she's almost of the age where she needs to consider who she's going to move in with.
Perhaps that's why it will never happen, Andy.
Yeah. Good.
Right, next piece. What are we on to next? I tell you what, this one, Advisor Alpha. Now, advisors out there, I mean, do you know what? I'm a real advocate of financial advice. Most people who are commentators in the industry or journalists or anything like that love to chuck mud at financial advisors. And do you know what? To be honest, quite often they deserve it. The financial advisors are a strange bunch. They're incredibly jealous. They don't like anybody innovating, doing anything different. I've had plenty of mud slung my way by them, and despite the fact that I'm actually trying to encourage people to use their services, financial advisors can get a bad rap. They get a lot of bad press from journalists, and some of it's actually deserved. I mean, there are a few cowboys out there, but I'm of the opinion that they do add value. The trouble is that a lot of financial advisors don't know how to show the value they add, and also, do they even add value? So this next piece is really looking at what an advisor should be doing to add value. But more importantly, what is the amount of value they add? Because you can put it down to a percentage amount that you should gain on your performance each year if you have an advisor. So if advisors out there, you may want to close your ears, and because you might not be delivering this, and anybody who's got an advisor, you should be looking at this and wondering, well, do you know what? Is my advisor delivering it? So what happened is a company called Vanguard out there, and Vanguard are well known in the world of passive investing. They do a lot of funds that track the markets. They're very successful. They're very good, actually. They've got a range of lifestyle portfolios which are very good. Now, they did a piece of research that was about a year or two old. It's pretty timeless, and I pulled it up and I had a look through it. And what they did is they tried to actually evaluate the extra percentage return an advisor should deliver, and more importantly, it wasn't what they should do. They claim that advisors generally do. Now, what they did to prove this, they came up with 7 areas that advisors add value, and I'm going to rattle through them because they're quite useful as a checklist for anybody who has an advisor, so they can go through mentally and think, yeah, does my advisor offer this value?
Okay.
Now, the first one is strategic allocation, and that pretty much means that they will tell you where to invest your money. Should you be investing in the UK? Should you be investing in equities, bonds, and that sort of stuff? So they claim that advisors are good at giving you some strategic allocation that is probably better than somebody could do themselves. I question that, but anyway, I'll go with what they're saying.
That's just a basic fact find, isn't it? At the sort of opening meeting when you meet your financial advisor, they should be asking you your attitude to risks, your sort of, your personal preferences, whether you like ethical stuff, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're right, but I suppose they're trying to say that once they've got that info, they can then work some magic and actually give you something that's going to work. And what they've done with this piece of research, they've gone through and estimated. They never proved it. I have to say, when you look at the detail, they never went through and got a range of advisors and tested them on all these areas and proved it. They just hypothetically used examples and said, well, do you know what? If someone does this, typically if you have a good strategic asset allocation process, it can add X amount of return. And they've done this for each section. So what they did, rebalancing, that's the second area, and they've said like rebalancing is whereby every now and then periodically you'll look at the allocation, so you're split between maybe bonds, equities, different types of equities like in America, US, Europe or whatever, and when certain areas perform well, they will start to become bigger chunks of your asset allocation, and when other areas perform badly, they shrink. So actually what happens is if you leave a portfolio without rechecking, or what they call rebalancing, so you go back to your original allocation percentages, it will actually start to skew one way, and therefore you become more exposed to things that have risen in price rapidly. In a way, if something's already risen in price quite a bit, then there's a chance that it could reverse. So, because every dog has its day after all. So rebalancing the payment you meant to add value. Cost-effective implementation. I love the terminology these people use, but that just means they can do it at the cheapest rate for you. So they can invest your money using the right platforms. They get economies of scale. Behavioural coaching. Now, I've never seen a financial advisor coach anybody on behaviour, but the idea behind that is that you could teach people to change the way they behave towards their money, or the way they invest. So you can stop them, for example, trying to market time. So I've talked about it before. It's very hard to market time. In fact, you shouldn't even try, because you'll never get it right. You'll never get the bottom of the market, and you won't be able to sell out bang on the top. If you do, it's more luck than judgment. And it's they say that financial advisors coach people. I suppose they can coach them on engaging with long-term objectives rather than daily fluctuations in prices, but that is what that area is talking about. So behavioural coaching. Tax allowances, pretty obvious. That's saying that you use them and you're tax efficient. Number 6 is spending strategy. Now that's another jargon piece, but really what they mean is, let's just say you have a portfolio where one area is taxable and one area isn't. Then if you were to draw some money out of it, it doesn't make much sense to deplete the area that doesn't have any tax ever applied to it. You want that to grow bigger and bigger, because there'll be no tax on it. So it's tax efficient for that area to grow. And if you've got something that is taxed at a certain rate or whatever, you might as well draw it from there. So that's really what it's talking about, is using tax efficient withdrawals. And it may even be people taking withdrawals from their pension when their marginal tax rate falls or changes. And the last one is the way they invest, with its growth, total return, income investing, etc. So anyway, what does that all mean? If you bung that together, what does that equate to? Could you guess, Andy? Give me a percentage. I'll give you a clue. It's between 1 and 10. Extra percentage return a year on average.
Yeah, okay. 4.2.
Well, I'll give you 3. So they work out that it's 3%. Now,
you shouldn't give it to me. 4.2 was 50% out almost.
Well, yeah, I feel like I'm being generous, Andy. I thought it was a pretty good guess, because really it was never going to be 10, because you never get really 10% a year, not often anyway, on most performances. But of course, that 3% is not every year. It's not linear. It doesn't go up in a steady rate. So they were saying over time. Now, 3%, it seems very coincidental to me that most financial advisors charge 3% up front on a lot of what they do, which I think is expensive, depending on what they're doing. So yeah, that was quite handy, because if you're Vanguard and you're selling passive type investments and you're doing something that was the report was aimed at financial advisors too, and it's only come up with this magic 3%. I question the validity of that number, but hey, who am I to judge? But what it does, it gives people out there a figure to aim at, and if your financial advisor is not adding 3% a year overall average, you don't sense this added value, or they can't demonstrate, which is more important, because I think financial advisors should move away from percentage increase in return. I think if they can demonstrate in each of those 7 areas that they add some sort of value, or at least they are thinking about it and doing some work around them, then I think that's not a bad thing to be having a conversation about.
Okay, you mentioned it earlier, insurance, and there's something come to light that everyone should be listening out for in all different types of insurance. What is it?
Well, there's 2 pieces here, and both are intriguing. The first one I want to talk about is making claims on insurance. Now, there was a court case that was taken to the Supreme Court. So there have been judgments made before in various different courts, and this court case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the judges made a decision that could have a significant impact on the number of claims that are paid out when people make a claim on any type of insurance. Now, what happened? There was I think it was a Norwegian shipping vessel that ran aground in stormy weather, so they had problems, and they obviously made a claim on their insurance policy for the damage to the vessel. Now, previously, the insurance company had rejected their claim because the company said that the people on board were unable to enter the engine room. I think the engine room flooded, so it caused loads of damage. I think that's what actually happened on the claim. So they said that because of the bad weather, the crew were unable to enter the engine room, which the insurance company proved wasn't the case, but the shipping firm continued pursuing it, and the Supreme Court actually judged that the fact that they made that false claim, or that false piece of evidence when they made their claim, was actually irrelevant, because fundamentally the bad weather did cause the problem with the ship and the damage anyway. So they said they would have to pay out. Now, what this means for everybody else out there is that if you make a claim going forward, if this actually makes a material impact within the insurance industry, because the ABI, which is the Association of British Insurers, are looking into this piece of this, what the judgment, and trying to interpret what it means going forward. But let's take a very simple example. That if you had a legitimate claim, say you lost something, and you produced a fraudulent receipt, and the insurance company showed that receipt wasn't true, that wouldn't actually materially change your right to claim. Whereas before they would reject the claim, the fact that there was damage or anything like that is the key point. So you would still be able to pursue a claim. So that means that going forward, the insurance companies could end up paying out a lot more claims. In which case, on the flip side, while you might think that's good news, it means for you and I, or anybody else out there who obviously doesn't try to make fraudulent claims or make claims, our insurance premiums will go up. So that's the good and bad of the latest court case.
Good, that's interesting to know, and it'll be interesting to see what the ABI say, especially with things like life insurance and things like that. So I'll be listening out for that. What else? There was another piece you said about insurance. Yeah,
the other piece. This is one that I'm sort of aware of from before. If you've got a previous, got a medical condition that you might not that when you go and take out travel insurance causes it to be very expensive. Now, for me, quite open on the podcast, my Crohn's disease is one of those things that when I go to take out travel insurance, it pushes the premium up, because they're worried that I'm going to go over there and something will happen to my bowel and I'll end up in hospital. Now, what people have been doing is they've been lying about conditions, and they found that there's some research done by Boots which showed that people are lying about their conditions in order to reduce a premium. Now, it was the scale of the problem was quite large, and I can't remember the number of people who did it, but it was very significant. Now, the point I wanted to make of the story was actually that invalidates any claim you can make, which is sort of nicely linked to the previous piece. The previous piece was talking about where you had a valid claim, but the evidence that you produced was sort of, whatever the way you described it, was perhaps correct and slightly incidental to the actual claim itself. So what we're talking about here is that actually when you took out the policy, you have to still be honest, and then your claim will be valid if you have a valid claim. So what I want to say to people is that there is an alternative. You don't have to lie about a medical condition because it's expensive. I've hit this myself many a time. And so what I do is you can actually ask an insurance company just to exclude it. So if I'm going on a short trip, I know, for example, that if I would go to Spain for a weekend or something like that, the chances are, if my particular medical condition, even if I got really ill, I could probably make it back to the airport, get on the plane, land in Gatwick, and get in the cab and get to a hospital. So, I mean, that's particular to my condition. But the point is, you can say to them, look, you have to disclose the condition. I still say and go through all this medical screening on the phone and everything and they tell me everything about. I tell them everything about my condition, and then they say, yeah, we can't cover you. But then I say, I don't want you to cover me, and then the premium goes back to what it would have been for a normal person. So there is an option out there. You don't have to lie and pretend you haven't got the condition if you've got one, because that's not a good thing. So it's just that people to realise that if you've got a condition that isn't going to cause you serious problems, you don't think, on holiday, then there is an alternative. But of course, if your condition could be something that could land you in hospital, then you're going to have to just suck it up and pay the premium, or go and seek a specialist insurer.
Good stuff. So is that us done for this week?
Yep, that's us done for this week, Andy. Plenty of content there. If you want to leave a review, actually don't want to, you should be leaving a review on iTunes, then please do, because it helps us in the charts, doesn't it? And if you want to get in touch with us, then you can at money2themasses on Twitter, that's with the number 2, or you can email us at podcast@moneytothemasses.com.
Excellent, Damien. Enjoyed it as ever. Until next week.
Until next week, Andy.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.